Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar on visual analytics. My name is Sharka Hubacek, and I am a business intelligence consultant at Billigence in Sydney. Let me quickly introduce us and share my screen with you. We focus on consultancy in business intelligence and data. From getting your data in the best shape to data governance, data visualization, which we will focus on today, and even predictive analytics and data science. We also look into CRM to give our clients some useful insights. As you can see here, our clients are from various industries across the whole world. And we are partners with the leaders in the fields to find the best solution for our clients. And now to visual analytics. In the previous webinar, I talked about why good visual analytics matters. I introduced three main pillars: data accuracy, our cognitive abilities, and getting attention of your audience. We also went through some not so good examples, and we touched what to focus on to make the dashboards better. You can watch the recording of the last webinar on our YouTube channel, and the presentation is published on our Tableau public profile. We will do the same for today's webinar as well, and we'll send you a link to both in the follow-up email. I will mention it at the end of the session as well, but you can look us up as Billigence on all social media platforms and Tableau Public. Also, there will be time for questions at the end, so don't be shy and ask. The whole webinar with the Q&A will be about 50 minutes long, so you can get your last caffeine fix of the day right before they close the door. Today, we will talk more about the good stuff. I want to introduce some principles that will help you design great dashboards and reports. I will go through a flow of design thinking, dive deeply into waters of minimalism, typography, colors, and space, and also explain Gestalt principles. All of those with lots of great examples. All right, our first stop will be design thinking. This flow was created by a design thinking institute based in Stanford University, known also as D-School. The idea is to focus on a goal rather than solving a specific problem, considering both present and future parameters of the problem should help you explore alternative solutions. It is an iterative process, which means redefining the initial problem is definitely not an issue here. The first step is empathy, which should be developed not only towards the user, but also the team you work with. Second step is defining a user story. If you have some experience with Agile and user stories, this is your moment to shine. Ask questions, try to understand the user needs, what they want and why, how they use the current report if they have any, what are the questions they need answers for. I would like to spend a bit more time with the following three steps though. The first one of those is ideate. Using the stories created in the previous step, it's time to use your imagination and go for it. Always start with a pen and paper. I know you might be rolling your eyes and asking why when we have computers. Well, it's much faster than creating a dummy data set, building some charts, or even looking up an image of a chart on the internet. Just give it a go if you don't believe me. Also, sketching, drawing, scraping, starting again from scratch is easier and so much more efficient. Actually, the process of redoing and recycling is important. Sometimes we get stuck with an idea that is not great and maybe not even good, but we put so much effort in the draft, we don't want to let it go. So it's a pretty good reason to stick with a pen and paper or a whiteboard. Or since a lot of us have been working from home recently and probably don't have a whiteboard, mirrors and windows with a chalk marker work perfectly too. And I'm talking from my own experience here. Just don't be scared to make a mess before you clean up. Also, mind maps are an awesome tool. I use them for making notes when talking to stakeholders, or as you see here, to keep my ideas in order. For inspiration, there are some tips and links in the reading list, but here I have to mention the Big Book of Dashboards, which is a terrific source of real-life business scenarios, and also Tableau Public. There's a gallery that uses hashtags and categories, so you can look up some business or fun inspiration as well. And now back to design thinking. Our next step is prototyping. I'm pretty sure there are at least a few of you who were asked to provide a dummy data prototype that was supposed to be just repointed and seamlessly become a live report. Well, we know how that ends. Here you can build on your sketches. You might want to skip the previous step to just go for it, but don't. Even half an hour of work off screen when you're not restricted by the tool itself will do you good and help you get rid of the useless ideas before you start drag and dropping. When working on a prototype, try being a bit of ahead. The more experience you have, the easier it obviously is. But think about sustainability and maintenance of the report you're about to build. And if it's a part of a suite of reports, think about how easy is the layout to replicate. The last step in the flow is testing. Sure, you need to test the dashboard functionality yourself, and not only on desktop, but also wherever you're going to publish. Or even check how well it renders in PDF if that's a required form of your report. From my experience, it's also great to let people try to break whatever you build. It's important for both experienced and novice users. They give you a different perspective. They might show you how they interact, what is their understanding of both the data and the functions, what answers their questions, and what creates more questions or even confusion. Before you go to Tableau server that keeps versions for you, think also about manual versioning of your workbooks. It's good to have an option of a rollback. And as I mentioned at the beginning, designing is an iterative process. Sure, some projects are short, but implementing feedback is important. Revisiting your ideas is equally important. You want to make those dashboards and reports useful and used. Okay, now that we know the designing process, let's take some inspiration in principles of minimalistic UX or UI and to cover some dashboard basics. I touched bases of minimalism in the previous webinar. This time, we'll take a look at the practical aspect of utilizing minimalism in your dashboard design. And we will also deep dive into dashboard basics, so be ready for lots of handy stuff. One of the greatest but often underestimated principles is negative space. White space brings calmness, or to be less spiritual, It gives the user a chance to focus on what's important. When you get rid of the unnecessary junk and won't try to have all the answers in one chart or one A4 dashboard, you'll get much cleaner look and feel. All of these dashboards have enough space around the charts. You know where to look. Negative space is positive, and as you see here, white space doesn't necessarily mean white. And here's my Tableau tip. You can bring either blank objects to your dashboard or play around with both inner and outer padding. Also, always keep in mind that containers are your best friend here. Our next stop is typeface. What is a typeface? Simply put, that's what most of us call a font. Arial, Times New Roman, or my personal favorite, Futura. They are all typefaces. Each of those has a variation of regular, bold, light, italic, and so on. And those variations are called fonts. And here I apologize in advance if I mix those two up. Nowadays, the distinguishing is not as important as in the old times of print, and the word font is definitely used more often than typeface. Here I have some examples of typefaces. All of them are the same text, same size, but different typefaces. There are quite huge differences. This is more important than you might think, especially when it comes to labels. Size matters. And as you see here, different typefaces have not only different letter length, but also height. This affects readability, and especially in small sizes, which we can see here. Here we have an example of the same typefaces I showed before, but this time used in charts. We have font size 7, so that's pretty small. The worst choice is definitely Impact, this one, because you need to work harder than necessary to read the numbers. Georgia is a nice typeface, but tabular numbers with even spacing are much better for labels than old style that descends below the baseline. For another example, cross steps, I used a bit larger size of 9. Some choices are better than others. Lightweight typefaces like the first row are easy to read, but also pay attention to the actual size of those numbers. Tableau book, which is this one, is larger than PT Sans. And beware of monospace typefaces that can give your visualization unnecessary old school or robotic look and feel. Now, you might be wondering how to find font families that work well together. And here are some ideas. Impact that I condemned for labels might work great for large and bold titles. When you combine it with a lightweight typeface for text and labels, they might actually look good together. Serif fonts, which is this one and those two, look elegant and serious, but be careful, especially when using them in italic font. They might be difficult to read. Sans serif typefaces are considered as modern and approachable. And you don't even have to use multiple typefaces, as in here. You can stick with one you like, or even with Tableau family font, because why not? I encourage you to check this slide again in the Tableau public workbook. You will have link in the follow-up email. There are more reasons reasons why Tableau family font is a good choice. And I want to mention one very relevant issue you might come across when working with Tableau and publishing to Tableau server or Tableau public. You might have heard about web-safe fonts. Those are fonts or typefaces that are widely available on basically all devices and in all web browsers. When you use a font that is not installed on the server or the user's device, your font will be re-rendered with a font with similar characteristics. But not always. So be careful about your choices and check this when testing. A family of Tableau fonts are always rendered correctly. So if you want to be super safe, you can choose them. There's also a link to a great article about Tableau and font rendering in the reading list. Oh, and I would like to mention that not all typefaces are free. There are open source ones, but also licensed ones. So check the availability of the font of your choice before you go wild. As a visualization developer, choice of a typeface is not always your choice. You might need to stick to the corporate identity and follow the design handbook. But for visualizations of non-corporate topics or when creating some infographics, you can use lettering that is spot on for the topic, as you see here in the Star Wars or Marvel visualizations. Or you can choose typeface that feels relevant, like this beautiful historical typeface for the Black Heritage Trail dashboard. And before we move on to another topic, I have some fun facts for you. Futura, as I mentioned, is one of my favorite typefaces. It originated in late 20s and is heavily influenced by Bauhaus. It is based on geometrical shapes, especially the circle. It was marketed then as the typeface of today and tomorrow, and it's used on the commemorative plaque left on the moon in 1969. Helvetica, you see on the right-hand side, is one of the typefaces you see everywhere. It's a bit younger, from 1957, and as you can tell from its name, it originated in Switzerland. And you can find this in commercial use of well-known brands like Lufthansa, BMW, Kawasaki, Verizon, Skype, or even Tupperware. Apple even used it as the system typeface until 2015. And also it's popular for transportation signs. Okay, and that was enough about letters, so let's talk about colors. There's a bit different approach when it comes to selecting colors of your whole dashboard or a report and individual chart. Of course, consistency is important, but there are a few rules you should think about when coloring your chart. First of all, it's not a coloring book and you're not 5. It might sound harsh, especially if you're 5 or you like coloring books, but less is more. These examples are well known. You can find them in every book or article about data visualization, and I cannot not talk about them either, simply because they're often not used correctly. So let's start with sequential palettes. Those are great for showing order from low to high. Diverging palettes with a neutral midpoint can be used in the same manner as the sequential ones, but thanks to this neutral midpoint, we can encode 2 different ranges, for example, positive and negative one. Categorical palettes are used very flamboyantly. They're supposed to be used for individual comparison. Similarly to pie chart, again, less is more. Try not to overdo it. 5 to 7 categories are great and easy to follow. Also, try not to use sequential palette for categories. I've done that in past as well, and it looks quite elegant, but it doesn't make any sense from the analytical point of view. It's hard to tell difference between super light blue and light blue. Another color use are alert and highlight. Bright, alarming colors get your attention and tell you there's something going on. Especially traffic light colors, red, amber, green, are often used as alerting colors. Highlighting color doesn't need to be alerting. We just want to draw users' attention. Another tip here, you can either use highlighting functionality that is native to Tableau, and actually there are a few of them, or you can get friends with all the shades of gray. And one more tip, you can use custom palettes in Tableau. You can just simply add them to preferences file in My Tableau repository. All right, and since we talked about red alert, we also need to talk about color vision deficiencies. The most common one is deuteranomaly. That affects 6% of male and 0.4% of female population. Males, and especially middle-aged and older men, in general, are more prone to suffer from one of the vision deficiencies. The rest of those affect around or less than 1% of males and much lower number of females. So even though it's not as common, it's always good to keep this on mind. And if you're unsure, just ask your audience how well they're receiving your color choice. Also, inclusion is awesome. And now some fun examples or creatively used colors. 60s are known for their love of rich, psychedelic, but quite earthy colors we can see in this Beatles visualization as well. The next example in the middle tells you to look for something dangerous. Both heat maps, the literal one and the crossed up below, use yellow and red palette to get your attention and to alert you. And the last dashboard is a great example of using colors consistently across multiple visuals with the aim to make reading of the charts more efficient. This is a great use of categorical colors. Now, I can't hear you, but you might be asking, where do I get the inspiration? And as you've seen in the examples before, but also in those in the typeface section, Star Wars, Marvel, and the Black Heritage Trail, all of those dashboards use color palettes that are relevant for the topic. There are online tools for creating your own color palette, like here, Coolers. You can get some inspiration also from movies. Check this color palette cinema on Twitter, or they also have Instagram account. The third one is an article where you can get some decades defining colors. Or the last one, you can even get colors from photos you like. And this also leads us to another principle, which is graphics. And by graphics, I mean images, icons, symbols, pictograms, anything that is not a word or a number, but still tells us a story. I've talked about this the last time as well. Images are part of the storytelling. Not only background images, but also icons for navigation or simplifying the visual part of the dashboard, be it arrows, maps, or pizza toppings. They all give a nice zing to your visuals. And as mentioned before in testing, images can render a bit differently, especially in the PDF version. So test this before handing over the final version. The last of the principles is consistency. Consistency is a silver thread of this presentation and also something I like to follow when creating dashboards and reports. Consistency creates a greater feeling of unity. It's not only relevant for one thematic dashboard, but especially when creating a whole suite of reports. Consistency is something that helps users to understand and navigate. It might feel restrictive from time to time, especially when the design, draft, or the layout is created by someone else. But think about the end user who's going to use it. Take a look at this great style guide by BBC. It is a consistent guide on how to be consistent. All those examples you have seen so far are all from Tableau Public, and there are links under each screenshot, so you can go, interact, or download the workbooks to get some inspiration from them. And the last topic of today is Gestalt. Proper German pronunciation is the same as Schnitzel. So, what's Gestalt? It literally means a form, and it's a school of psychology that started in Austria and Germany in the early 20th century. This form is also interpreted as pattern or configuration and emphasizes these patterns rather than individual components. The whole is other than the sum of its parts is usually used as a definition. These are 7 most common principles of Gestalt, and we'll take a look on how to use them in creating dashboards. Before I move on, Lindsay Benzedahl, a Tableau Zen master and ambassador, wrote an amazing article exactly about this. She also mentions that for some people, these elements of Gestalt might be so intuitive to use, they don't even have to think about it. But there are also lots of people who wouldn't even consider this as important until they read or hear about it from someone else. And honestly, this is the point of me talking about visual analytics here today. I'm pretty sure you've already seen at least something from what I've shown so far or of what I'm going to show next. Lots of those rules seem like common sense, and partly they are. But sometimes we are so busy and overwhelmed, we need to hear it again. So let's take a look at examples of dashboards that work and how they are utilizing Gestalt principles. Our first stop is Enclosure. In this example, you see a group of objects surrounded by border. Here, and here you see a background that groups those objects together. This is what enclosure means. Thanks to the border or the background, we perceive these objects to be part of one larger entity. Next one is similarity. Objects with attributes that are similar in shape, size, or color are perceived as group. The first example on the left is based on the same shape of a bowl with a spoon. And using the same shape all over again means we know all of those are meant to be together. On the right-hand side, even without looking at the color legend on the bottom, we can tell that countries with the same color are part of one group. So this is, again, a good reason to be mindful when working with colors. Our next stop is continuity. When objects follow one direction, they will be visually grouped. Here we have an example of breaking a reading pattern I covered last time. Z pattern is mentioned very often, sometimes even too often. All the Gestalt principles here are terrific if you want to step out of that Z box and do things differently. By combining colors and direction from top to bottom, we know which charts are meant to be for each player. And it is not uncommon that the principles of Gestalt are combined. Also, continuity is something we usually don't really think about. Just look at the second example. The reason why we perceive those dots or circles in one line as part of one chart is exactly this: continuity. Isn't it so simple? It's mind-blowing. And I can hear you say yes. Thanks to our human life experience, our mind fills gaps to create something visually familiar to us. And that is what closure means. I'm not a football fan, but I know my animals. I've been to a zoo enough times to recognize a lion. And the same goes for the right-hand side. Thanks to the familiar shape those charts are put in, I know this is a map of the US. Visually connected objects are perceived as a group rather than those that are not connected. Another example of genial simplicity. Why do we perceive line charts as one object and not tons of dots next to each other? Because they're connected. It's as simple as that. Proximity is grouping by physical closeness of the object. Again, here we see a combination of the previous principles, but one of them is also proximity of these and these charts. And the last principle we will cover is symmetry. Balanced, symmetrical objects are perceived as whole. We see boxes here at the bottom of Pulp Fiction visualization that are symmetrical. And also this chart itself is symmetrical as well. That's it. We went through design thinking. We dived deeply into basic elements of dashboards. And we also took a brief psychology class. And if there's anything I would love you to take away from today's webinar, it's these ones. Don't underestimate power of pen and paper. Agile and user stories are everywhere, even in reporting. Testing in production is for those who like to live dangerously. And always listen to your user. They might not know what they want, but be there for them to help them find their way. Negative space is positive, and white space doesn't necessarily mean white. There's time and place for each typeface, but there's no place for impact on labels. Rainbow colors are the best, but think about why and how you use colors in data visualizations. And don't forget to be inclusive of colorblind people. Statistics are pretty harsh. It might be you one day. And what to take away from our psychology lesson? Well, Gestalt and Schnitzel are pronounced with sh, just like my name. Reading pattern can be broken thanks to Gestalt principles. And also be humble, be patient, and don't be afraid to be inspired. Which brings me to the reading list I promised earlier. Because sharing is caring, here is everything I used while preparing for today. Here's the great article about rendering fonts in Tableau. And here's the one about Gestalt principles. If you want some visual inspiration, definitely check Tableau Viz of the Day, and information is beautiful. They might not be an answer to you to your business reporting call, but they bring to table important and interesting topics, and usually they also showcase some interesting charts. For more typeface and font inspiration, especially mixing those up, check these links. And for checking vision deficiency simulation, I use this Chrome extension, and for creating mind map, Xmind. Okay, so that's all from me, and now it's time for you to shine. So ask me anything, but preferably visualization and Tableau related questions. Okay, and we can start with a question from Matthew. Hi Billigence, would you recommend to use dark backgrounds in corporate reports? That's a good question, thank you. Yes, well, it depends. If your corporate identity allows you to use dark background, go for it. How can you get to know whether you are allowed to use dark background? You can either check PowerPoint presentations, or you can ask people around, and also try to be mindful of lines or labels. They need to be in contrast. Also, rich, bright colors work well with dark background. And there's also another option of using bold, dark paints or backgrounds for just part of your dashboard. When you do that, try to probably stick with the margins. So as you saw in my presentation, when I used my yellow background, it was either on top, bottom, or on the sides. Okay. Question from Samantha. Hey, just checked your Tableau public profile and really like the graphics elements. Where do you get them from? Thank you. I like them as well. Those are from Canva. And because I use Canva quite a lot, I decided to use a pro version, which is paid. And that way I have not only more possibilities or options what to use, but I also feel like I'm paying back to the community, the designers, the product itself. Next one. Hi there. Thanks for your presentation. Like the little jokes. Thank you. Do you have any tips on creating a template? Can you actually prepare something beforehand? Yes, you actually can. And I have quite a lot of experience with creating templates. I start with something what I call a skeleton. It's basically lots of containers, nested containers. I start with one across the whole dashboard, and then I nest inside next containers. So I have one for a header, title of the dashboard, or a logo. Next one is for filters. And third one is for the charts, the visual part, or analytical part of the dashboard. What's great, you can use the colors there, background colors, borders, and then what I would also recommend is to create an extra page. Something similar you saw for the BBC consistency guide on consistency. Just create one page with color coding, what backgrounds to use, what borders, what are the line rules, so whether it should be dotted, full line, what colors, also fonts, sizes, and yeah, and there's one thing you can do for the whole workbook of Tableau. You can go to the top ribbon and select Format Workbook, and here you can change the setting of the font. The default is Tableau Book, but you can change it to whatever you like. I did the same for this workbook. It's set to Helvetica, and of course, when you want to change the font for something else later on, you can individually change the font, as I did for the cross tabs or the line chart. Another question, branding guide usually restrict the color choice to limited numbers. How would you recommend to tackle this for categorical colors, since sequential color is not recommended due to the difficulty in differentiating them? Thank you. That's a good and quite a tough question. Brand guides can have something that's usually called secondary palette. So there might be more more colors you can use. If you don't have any of those, you can kind of use sequential palette, but you actually don't have that many options there either, because you need to pay attention to how well you can distinguish those or differentiate those colors or the shades of the given color. You can use Tableau palettes, or you can look up some complementary colors for the colors you have for the brand. You can use one of the online tools I mentioned before, or you can find in the reading list. Definitely you will find some complementary colors there. And Pooja's, wow, that's out of his Bible, very nice. Thank you, Billigence and Charaka. Thank you, Pooja. And she also mentioned that this Tableau dashboard, so she got the answer. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here today. But before you leave, I would like you to stay in touch with us. So let me share my screen again. And this is our website, billigence.com. So you can find us here. This is our email. And as I mentioned before, you can find us as Billigence on all the social media platforms: LinkedIn, YouTube, Tableau Public, Twitter, and Facebook. And this is me. You can find me as Sharka Hubacek on LinkedIn, so you can shoot me a message, or also Tableau Public, or my blog sharka.hubacek.uk. Thank you for being here today, and I hope to see you next time.